Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Candid Conversations, a part of the One America Movement's Corona Rebuild Initiative, where we connect the challenges of COVID-19, the divisions in our country, and the roles that we each have to play in order to move forward together. My name is Chandra, and I am the Senior Director of Programs and Operations here at the One America Movement, and I will be your host this afternoon. And today I am so happy to have my colleague and my friend, Alden Groves, with me here today. Hey, Alden.
Hey, Chandra. Good to see you.
You too. Alden, like many of us, has experienced a wild ride since COVID has started. And we wanted to invite him here today to talk about his latest move, his career path, and even the new baby that he and his wife are expecting any day now. So thank you for coming, Alden, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really glad to be here. It's funny, this whole virtual format thing. Right before I got on this call, I was like, oh, I need to brush my teeth. I need to make sure my breath smells okay. Do all the whatever. Like, wait a minute. It's a video call. My breath can be as terrible as I want it to be, and you'll never know the difference.
I can't smell your breath at all right now.
Yeah, well, it's fresh and clean. Don't worry.
Good to know.
But no, I'm glad to be here. It's good to be back with the team, and looking forward to talking about some of this today. I'm an external processor, so this is actually perfect for me to think about all of these changes that have happened in my life together, and I'm looking forward to doing that with you.
Excellent, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and jump in here. So recently you have been in a bit of a transition period. You moved, you're back in school, and you're about to, well, your wife is about to have a baby. So you're experiencing a lot of these kind of new beginnings all at one time. And we're going to talk about all that stuff today. But we just kind of wanted to start by checking in. So how are you doing, Alden? How are things these days?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I feel like 2020 is this funny. Everybody has in one, there's lots of things we connect on as humans and lots of things we generally share. But I feel like this is a sense of sort of shared, we're all touched by this in various ways. And there's something that's cool about that, even though it's really, I've been trying over this past year to find things that are worth celebrating. I feel like silver lining is a little cheesy, but finding things where you can be grateful, where you can have joy in the midst of hard things. And I actually do feel that there is some real value on a human scale to everybody's been touched by this in some way. So it's been a wild year. I know it has been for anyone who is watching this. I'm doing okay. It's busy. In some ways, that's good. Life has been so sort of boom, boom, one thing to the next, wild ride that I haven't had a ton of time to sit back and think about, like, sort of get stressed and anxious about things, because I just ain't no time for that. I think the main thing I say is overall, the majority of things I'm busy with are good things. I think life is in a good place when you're it's maybe a little fuller than you would choose, but because they're mostly good things on my plate, I'm really thankful for that. So doing okay.
Yeah, it's a good feeling when life is full, but it's full of things, all things that you want to be doing, and exciting changes. Yeah. And we do have a sense of kind of all being in this together, and it's hard, but also at the same time, it's good to bring people together. So, recently you took some time away from working with the One America movement this summer. And during that time, you moved back to Philadelphia. I know it's like where you grew up, and so you kind of knew the area already. But sometimes, when we go back to really familiar places as an adult in a different circumstance, we see things a little bit differently than we did when we were children. So now that you've kind of been back home and kind of re-exploring your hometown, how have things changed, and how have things stayed the same since you've been gone?
Yeah, it's always a fun question to think about. It is funny. It's been 10 years since I've lived here. Obviously, I've visited at points in between, but it's been a while since I actually lived here. And I grew up in and living now in kind of a small town just north of the city here. So I say Philly because nobody's ever heard of where I'm actually from, but it's like technically just outside city limits. And so it is sort of a weird, the small town bubble here of people who've been here for a zillion generations. And my family was a transplant. Neither of my parents grew up here. So even as a kid, I felt sort of like, I wasn't rooted maybe in the same way that some of my friends at school were. Um, but I think too, there's all of the kind of superficial things like restaurants. It's like, oh, that's a new place. I didn't know that was there, or that place shut down, or, COVID makes that complicated too. But um, I don't know. I think there's also a sense of relationally, um, depends on the relationship. Some relationships, it feels like coming home in a really fun homecoming sense. Other relationships where it feels like there's a disconnect. And sometimes that's just when you go somewhere else and you return, you do have some of those new eyes versus if you stay in a place and just don't really leave, that affects your perspective too. So it's been a good experience to come back. I was just talking about this with somebody at school about how some of those community things I do see with new eyes. Some of which has been really cool to bring new perspective and have conversations that probably wouldn't have happened before because I wouldn't have had some of the perspective I've gained since I left. And others of which has just been sort of you drift away from some things. So it's been good overall. And I'm thankful. Now it's sort of like the new chapter of I'm gaining new perspective here in a place that I've already been. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's that old saying that you can't go home again. And it's like, my family was a military family, so we moved around a lot as kids and always went back to my parents' hometowns in the Midwest. And it's like you go back and it's not quite the same, but yet at the same time, it's exactly the same for better
Yeah.
and for worse, right? So I guess moving back probably has even more of that effect on you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
So
It's a
I
funny
know
thing.
one thing you also did this summer was to start attending seminary, and I'd love to hear more about that. How has that been so far? And kind of tell us a little bit about your call story. How did that happen?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to Westminster Theological Seminary here in the greater Philadelphia area, which to sort of skip to the end of your question, the call part of it is somewhere that as a kid I swore pretty roundly up and down I would never go to. It's like I'm not going to go into ministry. I'm especially never going to go to Westminster Theological Seminary.
And that sealed it for you, right? As soon as
Yeah,
you said, I am not doing that, that's when
yeah,
God was like, oh, yes, that's what you
yeah.
think.
Seriously, be careful what you say. Yeah, so I mean that's a piece of the homecoming. My dad taught at the seminary for decades, like I don't know, 27, 30 years, something like that. When I was a little kid, I used to tell people sometimes that my dad worked at a cemetery because the words just kind of jumbled in my head. But yeah, so my dad worked there until he died in 2007, and then my mom actually works there now. My brother went there, so I'm the youngest of four. It's like a blaze my own trail, not doing seminary, not no. Um, so anyway, a few decades later for me, I was trying to figure out vocational call or vocation, same thing. It's redundant. And as a Christian, for me, that's like what is the call the Lord's placing on my life? That's a question to consider. And for me, that was a thinking about sort of like what are my gifts? What do I think I can present? What do I think I have to offer? What do other people think I have to offer? And what opportunities are before me? And so as I was sort of, God bless Taylor, my wife, I was trying to think about what I was doing with my life and having these conversations with her, again, external processor. So we'd go for a long walk in the woods and I'd be like, here's what I think I want to work with people. And, here's my interest in this. And here's some of the abilities I think I have. And she'd be like, yeah, I think you're good at this. I think maybe you should rethink that, whatever. But after about like the fourth time of us having one of these walks in the woods and me basically saying the same thing over again for 3 hours in a row, she was like, "Hey, there's actually a job where you could sort of like bring your worldview fully to bear, and you could like really love people and be in relationship with them all the time, and you could do some sort of like communication, writing, speaking stuff you like to do some of that one-on-one thing you like with people. It's called ministry." And I was like, no, because remember, I'd have to go to seminary. I'm not doing that. She was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." And so we had the next conversation. She's like, "Oh yeah, so by the way, that's called ministry, seminary. You should think about it." Um, and then I think even beyond that, it was her sort of helping paint a picture for me of what that could really look like and could look like for our family down the road. I finally said, "Man, okay." I somewhat grudgingly turned in the application, and I began to grow excited about it. She helped me catch the vision. But yeah, I think it was just having people tell me for a lot of my life, "You should think about this," and then recognizing just like a love for people I have, and a desire to really be part of people's lives, to walk alongside them in the hard things of life. So that's sort of how I ended up here. And of course, I started the summer with Hebrew, which is what my mom teaches. So I got to be, let's just say, she did not go easy on me. I didn't get the softballs. Anytime there's a difficult question, like, "Let's see, Alden, what do you think about this one?" Thanks, Mom.
Well, I have never met Taylor, but I think I like her already. And I think she's pretty smart, because it doesn't take very long of meeting you, Alden, to get a sense that you have a call for ministry. So I'm excited to see where you go with this. And I thoroughly do believe that it is your call. So congratulations and thanks for pursuing that.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pause really quickly too and say, in the spirit of, I want to practice gratitude wherever I can, just to say how much I appreciate you and Andy and others of my supervisors at One America giving me the opportunity to do. I took the summer off. You kind of mentioned that earlier in the call, but I took an academic leave to go get my butt handed to me by my mom in Hebrew class. But I had the opportunity to do that. You all prioritized me and worked around my needs and my schedule to be able to do that. So I just wanted to publicly say thank you. Not every employer would do that by a long shot, and you certainly did not have to. But I'm really thankful you did. I don't think I would have been able to continue if I hadn't had that opportunity to just sort of really hit the ground running for an intensive language course. So very much thank you. And kind of tying into earlier question about the new perspective thing, I was really glad to come back to all of you, and to meet some new folks on staff who joined even in the interim while I was gone. But particularly, not to make you blush on camera, but particularly I was really glad to come back to working with you again, Chandra. You've been a great support to me as a friend, and just you're a good person to work for. That was clear when we interviewed you for the job, and it has held true. But I just wanted to say thank you. And I think diving into the trenches of seminary, I've been really, really thankful to come back to One America stuff, because it gives me sort of like a touch point in the real world and in real people's lives, and just helps kind of balance me, grow me, challenge me, keep my perspective fresh. So I know that's an aside, and I kind of thrust that in there, but I really wanted to say thank you to One America overall, and to you in particular.
Well, thank you. And Andy, you're listening to this, right? You're writing this down for my next performance review, how great I am as a supervisor, right? But you took this summer off, and you're probably going to be taking a little bit more time off pretty soon, right? Because Taylor is expecting your first baby. So how are you feeling about that? I mean, along with all the other challenges and changes you have in life, becoming a dad, that's kind of a biggie.
Yeah. Yeah. Excited, overwhelmed. 2 weeks from today is our due date, October 30th. So it's getting real. Yeah, I think I am starting to feel some of the building, just sort of like energy that's halfway between excitement and anxiety. I think most of all, I'm just so excited to meet this little person. We have decided to let it be a surprise. We don't know if we're having a boy or a girl. So that'll be a fun surprise that's yet to come. And yeah, just to think that there's this little person who is right now still just a stranger to us, but like we're going to meet them soon. That's really exciting. I think it's been to speaking to the overwhelming piece. It's falling like right at the halfway point of my semester. So I'm just getting through midterms now. It's kind of terrifying to think about having a kid and trying to figure out how to read lots of books and pages and write papers and take tests and finish learning Hebrew and Greek and all that stuff. So that is really scary. But I think it's been a helpful perspective thing for me too, because in a really small way, and I don't want to overblow this, but like knowing that other people, I've met other seminary students who've have children right now, who have had children even in their like first semester at seminary, and to know that someone else has done that before me is such a comfort. And like, this can be done. Clearly, it must be able to be done because someone has done this. And so to kind of, again, I don't want to overblow my attachment to this, but it's just helped me extrapolate outward a little bit to say, this is why it matters for like, a young child of color to see someone of color in a position of leadership authority somewhere, because it helps to see like, I can do this. Or for a little girl to see a woman in a position of authority leadership. I think this has helped in a small way me gain perspective as not a person of color or a woman for why those things really matter, because of the comfort of this. I feel some assurance in the fact this can be done. And for me as a Christian, extrapolating farthest out, and most importantly, it's why it's one of the reasons Jesus matters so much to me. There's a verse in Hebrews chapter 4 that talks about how we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness. So as a Christian, I believe Jesus came as a human, really is the Son of God, really lived, really died, really rose again. And that sense of like, when I experience really hard things in life, to know that there's somebody who's gone through before, who's, I would say has walked through the valley of shadow and come out the far side and offers to like come back and lead me through. That's such a comfort. So I know that's like a really big extrapolation out of I'm having a kid in my first semester in seminary, but on each of those levels, it really has been an opportunity to remember like, it's going to be okay. I'm going to make it through, even though there are certainly going to be hard and sleepless times. But that's been a really cool sort of like external social and like faith-wise opportunity to consider things I'm thankful for as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing about newborns is A, they're portable.
Yes.
B, they just keep you up at night, right? So if you need to do some reading and you need to like walk around, doing this, you can just like have your book and like, there you go, or better yet, get it on Audible and you can like listen to your book and like, carry the baby around. So you'll figure it out. I mean, there are women who take babies into the classroom with them, so you've got it. You've got this thing.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the encouragement. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, other, in the spirit of the tension of life where things are beauty and sorrow run together, joy and sorrow run together, beauty and difficult things. I just read a piece about this that I was sharing with you all at work, but I just crossed over, I guess it was last week, the halfway point of my life. Of my dad died when I was almost 5,000 days old. That way you can do the math, figure out how old I actually was. And so I'll be 10,000 days old in this coming week. But I just crossed over the halfway point last week I lived, one and now a handful of days more of my life without him than with him. And so there's something that's really hard and sad about that. I mean, it's just a reminder of how much of my life, particularly the formative years, I've lived without him, and just I'm sad. I miss him. And I think even more so, kids are so adaptable. I just adapted to life without him really quickly. And so I think there's a sense of feeling the loss of that time. That's hard. But it's also really cool to think that kind of right at that bookends in a season of my life, I'll become a father. And so, yeah, as scary as that is to think about, how do you parent the kid? That just seems really hard. It's also really, I don't know. I'm a writer, so I see the kind of like poetic, parallel beauty of having this chapter fall right now. This is when God called me to go back to seminary. It wasn't 3 years ago. It's like right at this chapter of my life, and having a kid and all of that. So I appreciate that beauty and that symmetry too.
So are you planning a book about all of this then?
Who knows? Maybe someday, probably after I, retire and have time to write again.
Right. Yeah. Well, you keep my email and let me know, because I'll buy it. So from the perspective of a father, or a father to be, already a father, actually, the fact that you have a baby in utero, what are some of your hopes and dreams for the future of our country, knowing that now you have somebody that's going to live on beyond you? What are your hopes and dreams for the country that your child is going to grow up in?
Yeah. Whew. That's a big one. I don't know. I mean, that's part of the scary and the exciting part, I think, of having a kid, is having to really consider and grapple with the future even more. So I think there are opportunities to be frightened by that and opportunities to be really excited about that. Even in the midst of 2020, the special year it's been. I think it also sort of ties back into your first question about the sort of seeing Philadelphia with new eyes. I'm really thankful that I had the opportunity and the privilege to leave and to come back. And so many ways I've been blessed and cared for and provided for in that process to make those things possible. But just on a human relational level, I'm also really thankful. I've talked about this in other contexts, but I think it's part of how I ended up in this work is, Philadelphia is a particular context. I went to college down in South Carolina. That was a very different particular context. I lived for quite a few years in Virginia after that, in Charlottesville, moved there the weekend of the Unite the Right rally. And that was a really particular context that in a lot of ways felt like maybe some of the stereotypes of the sort of Philadelphia and South Carolina meeting in that place in our country. And so I think that's part of the hope I have is I had the privilege to live in those different places, build relationships in different places. I have friends who are very different from each other. And I think who would trust me enough that if I said, hey, I'm going to have like my 50th birthday party or something, like friends who are very different than each other would come because they love me and are willing to. And I would hope that they would trust me enough to trust each other enough. But I feel like that's part of the vision I have for the future and for why I think What America's Work is really important is not that everybody has to agree, but that neighbors would have opportunities, particularly the people who have the privilege to do some of those things that other people don't, would take advantage of them for the good of their own heart, for the good of their neighbor, for the good of the country, to really build those relationships. I think it's tricky. It's a big ask for somebody on whatever side they fall on, wherever they live. If they have not had the opportunity to go elsewhere, to get beyond their bubble, it's a really big ask to ask them to just do that in a vacuum, to put themselves in someone else's shoes. So I think for my child, how I would seek to raise them and my hope for their future and the future of our country and our world is the good side of globalization, relationships and cultures building and growing. And, again, for me as a Christian, that's the picture of the new heavens, the new earth, like the best of the cultures coming together, every nation bringing its sort of like great treasures culturally together. That's a real hope I have. And I think there's a sort of your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven sense of there's a tension of we're not there yet, but there's also a real sense in which we can realize some of those things now And I think it's our call and our responsibility. I would certainly say to my fellow Christians, but I think to my fellow Americans to lean into that together and grow in relationship with each other, to take the time to do the hard work of listening and hearing stories and building relationships. I think that's my love, and it's something I hope to instill in my child, and I hope that they can help carry that with them as they go forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to say something more, but I feel like that was so eloquently put that I'm just going to leave it right there. Thank you so much, Alden, for being with us today, for sharing your story, for coming back, even though you're also in the midst of seminary and becoming a father. You really are a blessing to our organization. And thank you for being a part of it. And thank you for chatting with us today. If you all in the audience want to see more from Candid Conversations, you can catch us every Friday, where we talk about the challenges of COVID-19 and how all of us can play a part to move forward together. You can also check out more about One America at oneamericamovement.org or find us on Facebook or Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Chandra.